everybody, and welcome to paper session 2. We're going to begin a little out of order of how we're listed on the program with Rivera, Cli-Fi, yes, and Community Alliance in Reporting Environmental Systems. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, everybody.
Give you a heads up at 15.
Hi, my name is Rich Rivera. I found out about this at the Graduate Center, and I decided to try to put my own research into this, which is looking at what the future is going to be in New York City. And so I'll start talking about it, and then I call this the Community Alliance and the Reporting for Environmental Systems, also known as CARES. Okay, what I did was I kind of took something from I took this here. I said I put it into Gemini, and I created some images just to give people an idea of what a situation like this would be in the area of East Harlem, specifically zip code 10009. Oh, 10029. Yes. So anyway, so on a global scale, represents almost $2 trillion, over $2 trillion spent, according to the United Nations. You have over, close to 4 billion people living on these coastlines. This is around the world, and the World Health Organization, projects that 250,000 people will not be around within the next 5 to 25 years due to climate. And then now bringing it into New York City, we have now $46.2 billion for protection against one single 100-year storm in NYC. I want to explain what that means. This is a 1% chance that there will be a storm in the next 100 years. How many storms have we had, right? Ida, before that Sandy, and in October 29th. And we lost two souls because of this in 2025. One person was electrocuted in Washington Heights, 75th, I believe. And another person in Brooklyn went back for his dog and didn't come back. And this is all due to flooding. I don't want to sound melodramatic, but I know I'm showing a dystopian future here, but at the end of the day, we have to understand the intersection of things like socioeconomic, racial, infrastructure gaps, and flood exposure. So basically, I want to combine the social sciences and the physical sciences together to create something, for us, by us, but and for the people and by the people, because they're better than weather stations, especially like a grandma on a senior center that's been living in New York City for eons, right? With all due respect to my grandma. So, so this is a 1609 rendition. So basically, the Dutch were here first, right? New Amsterdam, then Duke of York. You know what I'm saying? So basically, this is originally the map of New York City, and I'm going specifically from Harlem. So this is West Harlem, Central, East, and I noticed something. This was the first thing I did before I even started getting into this research, and I was like, man, this looks a lot. This is so familiar. This is, by the way, I should give you a backstory. So I did put, and you can actually click on this link, and anybody can have these slides. And so it'll show you that Sandy's footprint in some of these areas, and then there's also, this is 2050, 2100, and then at category 5. So I overlaid a whole bunch of different layers on the ArcGIS, which is a geographical information system available to everybody. If you look ArcGIS online, this is the first thing I did, and then I went looking at this. I was like, wow, these things look the same. This may happen again. This used to be a river. They used to come from the west all the way to the east. This is and this was actually marshlands used for fishing and hunting. Nobody really lived there. But we dumped a whole bunch of landfill, and we put a bunch of projects on there, right? So you notice there's a lot of nature complexes right on top of these areas that are not in a good situation. But we're trying our best to do things like green infrastructure, but I took it to the next level to say this is something I would love to have. And the closest city I've ever seen in my life was Singapore. Awesome. I mean, Amsterdam, the Dutch are doing great things, but I found one of the most coolest. I've never been to Shenzhen in China. They're also doing something, but kind of, you know. So this is kind of like my research area is kind of here, and what I'm doing is a test bed, utilizing a remote sensor. So we have a 7.5. I should have given a picture of it, but we have, you know, weather stations, and we're trying to, you know, we're actually trying to get people's information, their experiences, and how can we put that into our remote sensing, our satellites, that we can, you know, how we have grandma's data and that satellite data, you know, combine together to give some more hyperlocal weather information. I mean, they said it was going to snow, right? So these are some, excuse me, these are some of my statement problems and some research questions. So areas, I mean, has anybody experienced any flooding? Like, yeah, may I ask what areas you guys live at? Southern Brooklyn?
Well, I experienced it here. In like a couple of years ago, I came into class, we had that big storm, and had to stay over in a hotel because all the subways were flooded.
Okay. And then, like, yeah, and just be advised, if there's ever flooding, you take a bus. Okay? Those buses can handle rain up to a year. They're, you know, I saw it in real time action, and I think it was Ophelia in September 29th of 2023. It's up around 11 a.m. Pretty cool. I mean, in that with that respect. So anyway, and then, you know, New York City has over 70% of surfaces. I mean, it's like pouring water on a porcelain plate. And all these, and this is we have 100-year-old infrastructure. I mean, you see how the trains are, and you know, what's the future going to be in the next 100 years, right? And we do have some data. I'm only going up to 2050 in terms of what this looks like. This is 2050, right? Worst case scenario, 2050. But the West, just be advised that from here, water goes down, right? So City College is 100 feet above sea level. So it's, and those purple things are evacuation centers that I added on there. Because at the end of the day, what I'm going to do is create an evacuation map, something offline, right? For people to be like, okay, I'm here, I'm going to go this way. And it'll be offline as well, because I saw 9/11, my phone didn't work. And, you know, this is something that can happen again. And so anyway, and then Columbia University is also above sea level. But then you have here 125th and St. Nicholas. It gets flooded a lot. And it leads me to believe, like, you know, the runoff. We have clogged drains. We have good drainage, but there's always clogged. I mean, we have leaves. They're not cleaning the streets like they used to when I was a kid. And I'm from the Lower East Side, by the way. Parents came in from Puerto Rico in the 50s. And I grew up near Chinatown. So anyway, yeah, so we have such real great infrastructure. Deep and continuous flooding is over a foot. And then below that, it's called nuisance flooding. Kind of like the stuff that you lift your shoes up, and still annoying because it's a nuisance, right? And so anyway, so the problem, what I noticed is that we have gaps. You know, we get our phones, we have these messages on our phones, and it shows us like it's going to rain today, it's going to be, but the thing is, or it's going to be something more catastrophic. We have what's called the New York City Emergency Management, and they do send messages, and people don't want to evacuate. Why? I noticed in our surveys, because my first 2 years of this journey, I did surveys and I was doing data collection on our weather stations. But in terms of the survey, these most people were like, they're not leaving because they have pets and they don't know where to go. I said, I'm not going to no shelter. I'm going to stay here and just rough it out. And God forbid, like you have something like, you know, like this is like, you know, over 10 feet. Like it might be problematic for some people, especially live on the second, third floor of the building. And then, you know, your electricity is going to be off. So anyway, so on the bright side of things, can we do more to help communities adapt to the future? And also, how can we find ways for people to swiftly evacuate their places to higher grounds? Like I was pointing out, going from, let's say, First Avenue and 106th Street all the way to City College. There's a good pathway to go get there and to avoid these future floods. And also why weather information not being disseminated to communities. Some people don't really know that there's all these great products that NOAA has, and New York City, and we have an overwhelming amount of weather information. And then I decided now going into the sci-fi. Imagine being able to get weather information from animals. I believe maybe we did that a long time ago. I mean, I learned in the military that, what's this called, lichen on the tree, okay, this way south. I learned things like that, or looking at the birds, or there's somebody maybe coming this way because the birds are flying up, those kind of things. And this is just next level. Imagine being able to, talk to insects and animals, and who knows, that'll be a beautiful future to look forward to. And then, actually, this is a shorter version, but so basically, I want to do something that's community centered, and I don't want to go there. So this is the weather information I have from our satellites, from our remote sensors, and this is what I see a lot of these meetings, like they give you this information, but like, where's your input? Where's the community's input? That's why I love going to senior centers the most. That's one of my favorite places because the history there, for me, they're a lot better than a weather station. I always tell people my grandmother's a way better weather station than the ones up there, and then those are satellite that we have to know of. And so, but the thing is, combining the two is the most important thing, to get people's input, and for them to, I want to create these citizen scientists and students that we have, for those students that are interested at City College, we have what's called CUNY Hires for high schoolers, and then we have an REU program as well. So you can type in REU and CCNY, do a Google search on that, and it's you get 3 college credit, you get paid for learning into for getting into the sciences, and a foot into the door into graduate school if you want to go in that direction, which is freaking awesome. I wish I knew about this a long time ago. So I'm gonna pause there, and if anybody has any questions, no.
So if you do go about going further into the picture and helping people, how do you get funding for this? Who will help, and how do you generate a big buzz?
I know that's the buzz is the question. Like I'm luckily I'm funded by NOAA so far, and we have the thing is the buzz, right? That's actually that it's getting people like is this really interesting to them? So like what I've noticed is could I go to Community Board 11 is called over in Community Board 11M in Harlem. They're more focused on air quality, which is indeed a problem over there. I don't know if you noticed there's a breakout of Legionnaires, which is like damn out of nowhere. We don't, I mean I don't really know where it's coming from, but I know one of the things is stagnant water. That's one of the reasons why it's a bacteria. But they're focused more on the air quality. So like, and then there's another environmental justice group called We Act. So that's another group that I engage with, and they're about environmental justice, but what I'm doing is I'm going directly to the I'm going straight as to Nightshade. I'm going to these senior centers, and I'm talking whether Yoga, Pangyol, Poly Français, like whoever it is, and to just engage with the community, because it's important to just show face. I'm not going to go like this suited up either, because I don't want to look it's like you have to I don't want to be a salesperson, and I want to go in there because this it's part of the same community that my parents are from, and that's kind of why I want to focus, and I feel. And on top of that, why is the whole Ninth complex going from Harlem all the way down to the East River? It's right in front of the water, right? On land that's not even supposed to be built on, landfill. We do have some, we have some great infrastructure projects going on, in terms of Harlem, and then in Lower East Side, for example. And but I mean, the ground is kind of not doing good. I mean, you ever heard of 161 Maiden Lane? In downtown Manhattan? It's not even anchored into bedrock, it's anchored into landfill. Look it up, 161 Maiden Lane in downtown.
I found the mapping really impactful. So do you use images of maps in simulations to explain to people what the risks are? You know, I think a lot of us, like you're saying about innate knowledge or knowledge from elders, like we know Native people did not build there. It's a marshland on purpose, right?
They were fishing and hunting, and
they knew to leave where water would eventually dwell alone, and city planners went contrary to that, and that's how you end up, with, you know, with the problems that we have. So do you explain that to people when you go out?
I have I made a video. I'm sorry, I made a video. So I did a bunch of screenshots. And if you, by the way, this is Wikipedia, Wioikea, now Wikipedia, and you can find this map. It's a map made by the Wanett Conservation. But anyway, they have you could move like this dial and go from 1609 all the way to 2025, wow. And you're gonna notice FDR Drive is right here on this border.
Wow.
Yeah, so I highly recommend. But so anyway, so what I did was I did snapshots.
Like animation to show them.
Yeah, I did that, and then I kind of the next step is to add something like this, add more, because this is a bunch of layers that this data coming from FEMA, NYC Open Streets, USGS, and NOAA, and some of our own data that we have from from City College, from our weather station. So I just put a bunch and I don't know why I did that, but I just noticed that this looks like this, more or less. Like I just noticed like this is like, that's what caught my attention. I was like, this is what I want to study, because this is a problem for me in the future.
Yeah.
And then and everyone's telling me the same thing. Well, I'm not going to be around 2100. I don't care. I hear that all the time.
So are you saying that Manhattan is over water and it will sink?
As we speak, we have 3 millimeters every year of water, and parts of Manhattan 1 to 2. And this is not just Manhattan. It gets a little bit worse in areas of Queens, right? Flushing, and there's areas that are sinking. NASA did a study that NASA JP a couple of years ago. We have land subsidence in areas of New York City. So you have and they say between 1 and 2 millimeters each year, and 3 millimeters. What does that mean? 5 millimeters, right? and this is nothing, right? And if you look at it in millimeters, right? But times that for the next 100 years or 1,000 years. I mean, they said Lucy was 2.5 million years. They found something even older. I mean, they found the same species 4.4 million years. We're going to be around for millions of years, in my opinion. I know it looks like it's not, but give it a chance. Give us a chance. We're going to be around. So why not prepare for the future and not wait like for a disaster to happen? It's, oh yeah, we need to do this. I hate doing that. Wait, let's like anticipate, like just like these movies. There's always a disaster happens. Okay, we need to do this, guys. Yeah. Yes.
We're gonna take Lee's question and then we'll move on.
I was just gonna ask, have you been working at all? And you said you're from the Lower East Side, with community gardens, because we're talking about working with communities, and that's a place that there's of course great interest in conservation and thinking about, of course, like returning to and adding more sort of natural spaces. I live in Inwood, which is very high up, and we have the woods there, and the marsh, they've restored it. So I mean, like, how can we, work with these community groups that are and is that something
I just put a weather station in 1674 Lexington on 100th Street in Lexington, Maggie's Magic Garden. And I did that because someone wanted to, Mount Sinai is building a lot in Harlem, and they wanted to kind of take over the whole garden. I put the weather station there to save her garden.
Yeah,
it's federal property,
Yeah.
And then, but they still take half of the garden though. But but at the same time, it just felt like she's about 80, 60 feet above sea level. It's a great place to be for people that are living down. Yes.
One more.
Great presentation. Thank you so very much for that. I'm very interested to know exactly what do you want the outcome to be. Do you want us to stop building in Manhattan, or do you want us to develop a way to have a relationship with the landscape that allows for sustainability? Bearing in mind that human beings have always moved into new areas and made it their own. We just saw a presentation earlier where the last slide was human beings terraforming a planet, and these 3-foot-long kilocentipedes to kill the monsters that were there. Human beings, this is aspirational for them to take over and conquer the land. How do we move away from that? And is that what you want us to do, moving away from our innate desire to conquer the land?
No, I mean, New York City is, this is all about, New York City is about real estate. Manhattan is all about real estate specifically. I mean, but what I just want people to understand that where do you live at? How do you get out? That's all I want people to know. Okay, I live in evacuation zone 2. My evacuation center is here, and we have all that information. Why don't, when there's a disaster, people just going, I don't want, and it could be worse than a Sandy. And I want people to be aware of where they're going. That's as simple as that. I want us to be, so it's pretty much, and I learned in Boy Scouts, be prepared. That's the motto of Boy Scouts. As simple as that. And that's kind of what I want to, do with this whole research. So just something as simple of, just, okay, I'm getting in, there's going to be a hurricane, whatever. And I'll be aware that this is the direction I'm going. Now, I'm not walking on this street, I'm walking on this street. 106th Street from 5th Avenue down to the FDR Drive was a big river. Maybe it might be a big river again. It's the widest street if you look between there and going up, towards 116th Street. But just kind of like, and knowing the history underneath there, that water may not be able to handle that anymore, because we still have running rivers underneath our feet. I know feet. I made a new word up too. And so yeah, that's kind of like for people to understand. It's more of a visualization thing and looking into the future. So that's kind of why I wanted to present this, because it's more of looking into the future. Not and something in the next 5 years. It seems like something serious could happen, but maybe not. But that 1% of 100, that 1% chance of a 100-year storm is actually increasing a little bit more all the time. I mean.
So, just the last question, please indulge me. Just the last question, following up on what you said. Do you envision something when you look through your time machine into the future? Do you envision flood-proof cities?
Well, no, sponge cities.
Sponge cities.
Sponge cities. And there's a great paper that was you look up Sponge City. Forgot the name. It was in anyway. I'm not going to say it, but it's definitely in China that they had written a paper about creating a sponge city. And Singapore is that for me.
Yes, Singapore.
I mean, Amsterdam is below sea level in some places.
Yeah.
They have it. They got it right. Canal Street. If you go to Amsterdam, they have Canalstraat, Prinsenstraat. Yeah. These are actual canals. We just let's put all our garbage here. We were just throwing garbage in these canals. It's like, what is the mess? Just because how it was in 1800s New York. Look at the pictures. It was a little bit special. I guess it's. We had to cover all of that mess, and we're making buildings, and so there's landfill there, and especially on the east, on the east side, and they happen just to put nicer complexes. I'm not saying they did that on purpose, I don't know, but, you know what I'm saying? It might be a little bit of, but yeah.
All right. Well, we had your questions now because you made me back off. So thank you for your patience and your great questions, everybody. So we're going to move on to, we'll welcome Jason back again to tell us a little bit more about City Tech's science fiction collection.
All right. Sorry you guys are getting so much of me today. We had someone have family emergency at the last minute, so I'm filling in again. But it was a great opportunity to maybe share a little bit about the science fiction collection, which I mentioned earlier when I was doing the retrospective of the symposium, but to talk a little bit more about how we got it and what we're doing with it and how it's been growing over the years. So this is a mostly recent photo of the City Tech Science Fiction Collection. You can see the rows of stacks in our archives room. It's overseen by Wanett Clyde here. And it took a long time for us to get to this point. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But why have a science fiction collection at a place like City Tech? One of the things about City Tech is that it's like many technological or technology-oriented institutions, is there's this growing recognition that there needs to be a synthesis between the humanities and the STEM fields. And in fact, here at City Tech, we have interdisciplinarity built into all of our baccalaureate programs. You get a bachelor's degree, you have to take what's called an interdisciplinary course. This is a course that's taught either by a team of instructors from different disciplines or led by an instructor from one discipline with guest speakers from different fields that you add in and you address the topic from their particular point of view. And the thing about science fiction is that it's the genre of interdisciplinarity. I mean, you can't have science fiction without the humanities mixed with the sciences and technology. I mean, this goes all the way back to Hugo Gernsback and his tripartite definition of science fiction, that it's the mixture of science and technology with prophetic vision with, in his words, romance. Not like a romance novel, but adventure stories, right? These things mix together to make exciting stories that we enjoy, but also you give us access to knowledge and also give us access to thinking about things in a way that we might not ordinarily do. So other universities that have big science fiction collections, the Georgia Tech Science Fiction Collection, which began as the Bud Foote Science Fiction Collection. Bud Foote was an instructor at Georgia Tech, taught the first science fiction class there back in the 1970s. And it's since grown. Kim Stanley Robinson and others have donated materials to the collection. Another big notable science fiction collection is the Eaton Science Fiction Collection at the University of California, Riverside. Not just with materials, but with personal papers and those types of artifacts, which make it really great for researchers. And then there's the science fiction collections of the Spencer Research Library at the University of Kansas, which have the papers of many science fiction writers in addition to the different types of materials like what we have now at City Tech. So how did this come about? Really, we got a turnkey opportunity thanks to my colleague, Dr. Alan Lovegreen, who is now at Orange Coast Community College in California. He and I got hired at the same time, and he had a connection to someone that, because it's an anonymous donation, I can't say this person's name, but we'll just say that this person had been storing a lot of materials on their college campus that belonged to them as part of their research, and they needed a new home very quickly. And so he reached out to Alan and said, hey, would you be interested in this? Well, Alan came to me and said, hey, we got to figure out some way to get money to move this collection from California, where it was, to Brooklyn, because it has everything. Basically, almost 600 linear feet of all the major early science fiction runs, except going back. It doesn't include like going back to the origins of Amazing Stories, but our oldest artifact from the collection is the, is it the June 1929 Amazing Stories? Another slide will correct me on that, I'm sure. But anyways, we had to come together and figure out a way to get this stuff here. So we made a proposal to the City Tech Foundation. It's the part of the school that is the funding part of the college. And they awarded us $5,000 to move the materials here. But that wasn't the turnkey part of it. That meant that on Alan's dime, he flew out and helped box the materials and load them onto the moving truck. And then when they got here, it was up to us to then move the 160 boxes of materials into our offices. You can see we made these really cool cubes, 4 boxes on a side, filling up the middle of our shared office spaces to store all these things, because as great as having the collection was, we didn't have space in the library yet. But the librarians, Keith Mikowski, was a big part of this at the time, was able to clear out space in the archives so that we would have a place to then put the collection. That also took time. Basically, that little cart that you see in the corner over there, I bought for the express purpose of moving the boxes from our offices into the library, basically 10, 12 at a time. I have boxes like this, and I'm like going down the ramp, you're trying to make sure it doesn't fall over, and shelving those things in our spare time. One key thing that's made this all possible is we firmly believe in Gibson's aphorism, the street finds its own use for things, and we've had to do that in a lot of different ways, because after we got the $5,000, there's no more funding, right? And also, this is one of my favorite deep cuts. This is a cameo of William Gibson in Wild Palms from 1992 television. It's cool to see him actually be a presence rather than just someone you see a name on the cover of the book. So one of the things we did first was create a website for the collection, and because of all this throwing things out, this was actually in a bin on the loading dock. I was just looking through the trash one day, as one does, and it was a yearbook from City Tech from 1963. And that image, I thought, was captured what the science fictional aspect of things, so that became our poorly put together banner image for our website. And then we built on the website aspects for the science fiction collection, the people that are involved. Eventually, the symposium has become a part of this, and also resources where we share information, assignments, and other types of material for teaching science fiction. But now, for the collection itself, we needed to know what was actually there, and unfortunately, the library doesn't have additional resources to add all these materials to our existing finding aid. So we started simple. Basically, I did a shelf survey with a wide-angle lens camera so that I could see the spines of everything on every shelf and label all of those shelves. We built a legend, so we knew we could identify each row of stacks and which shelf there is on an individual stack. And then from that, we began using Google Sheets to create the finding aid. And this took years, because again, it's just something we do in our spare time. But with the finding aid, we're able to be able to say where a particular thing is at any given point in time. We've had students and faculty members all give a hand in this work. It's been a team effort. So what have we inventoried? What's actually there that we know about? We have 10,519 items. Basically 600 linear feet. There was originally 160 book boxes. We have 4,147 magazines. This includes complete runs of Astounding, Analog, Asimov's Galaxy, If, fantastic stories. I mean, it's breathtaking whenever you take a look at what we have there. Unfortunately, some of the materials are very fragile, so this is something that we have to keep in the archives and can't put out in circulation or have folks just walk up to. Also because we don't have archives, a reading room for archives that they have at, say, University of California, Riverside. Wanett and I coordinate to try to make things available for when folks do want to see something either for research or for class visits. Another part of the collection is extensive runs of Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine and Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. So the Garden of Working Paths, we have a copy of that in the collection. It's interesting, I mean, you can kind of see from the materials aspects of the donor's scholarship, but I don't know about the mystery stuff. That was something I was thinking about the other day. Now, because we started with that original donation, the word has gotten out. We've been celebrating it now for 10 years with the symposium, and other people want to contribute. And our first extra donation come from our colleague Aaron Barlow, who passed away in 2021. Before he did, he filled a huge gaping hole in the collection with Philip K. Dick material. The original donor was still doing scholarship on Dick, and so he kept all that stuff. So we didn't get any Philip K. Dick stuff in the collection. But Aaron had wrote the second PhD dissertation in the United States on Philip K. Dick. Does anybody know who the first was? Kim Stanley Robinson. So Aaron was a little sore about that because it was like a year's difference, very close. But he gave us, like you can see here, like these are very rare collectible cloth-bound editions of all of Philip K. Dick's collected short stories. I mean, what he donated was actually monetarily worth a lot of money, and now we have filled that gap with that in the collection. One of my colleagues in the Science Fiction Research Association, Dr. David Mead, former past president of the organization, he gave us some material relating to Jack Vance, including a really cool database that he had put together with some of his students, including software to access. It's called AskSam, which we have to basically run through emulation, but it does give us access to something that's very bespoke. I mean, this is one of a kind of research that, should someone wants to do work on Jack Vance, this is the one place you can get access to that is now here at City Tech. Kenneth Bernard, playwright, writer. He was the father of our colleague, Lucas Bernard, the chair of the business department. He gave us some of his father's materials after he passed away. Even though his father, he was a playwright and his work wasn't concerned in science fiction, he was a reader of science fiction. So that was another 12 linear feet of materials we got through that connection. Now is this is kind of a bane for Wanett and I, is donor Charlie Seelig. I mean, he's a wonderful man to make the donation that he has. He's a science fiction fan from Rhode Island. He's like a city manager in Massachusetts, I think now. And for some reason, he hasn't explained exactly why he was wanting to find a home for his collection, but it's basically about 7,400 items. And Wanett and I really didn't read those first emails closely enough.
Oh dear.
Because it wasn't just the amount, he was saying he was willing to ship the stuff to us. So we didn't think, someone's going to be shipping like gobs and gobs of boxes. No, we have now received 76 boxes, each about 40 pounds each. It costs a media mail rate about $40 a box. And he told me that, because I asked him to come to our symposium today, because he hasn't had a chance to come yet. He said he couldn't. He had other business to attend to, but he's working on his 77th box now. So we will be getting that shortly. Only about half of that's been shelved, and we haven't inventoried that yet. That's like the next big push will be his materials. But what's great is he's given us a lot of fanzines, autograph material, rare items. We've only, just as we shelve some of the things, we pick things up and open it. It's amazing that someone's making a gift like this that everybody here now can access and benefit from. Our most recent donation is from the estate of Theodore Krulik. He was a science fiction writer in his own right, but he was also the foremost expert on the writing of Roger Zelazny, who you see over on the left there. Published 2 books on Zelazny, and we didn't know it when the estate reached out to us about the extent of the materials being donated. They just said it was books. But we have gone through it now because they donated it. You're thinking about Richard's presentation in Changing Weather, how the weather's changed, the climate's changed. That big rainstorm we had about 4 or 6 weeks ago, that was the day that the executor drove out from Queens to donate the material. So I had my cart, pouring down rain, only an umbrella because I couldn't find my plastic sheeting. I was an unprepared Boy Scout that day. And so I'm loading the boxes on the cart. I'm hiding under the overhang out here to try to keep everything as dry as I could. All the boxes got soaked. So I rushed into the NAMM building, ripped the boxes open, and spread everything out on my desk and my other office mate's desk. Thankfully, nothing got wet, but the boxes were destroyed, basically. But they gave me an opportunity to look at what was being donated. And we have gobs of autographed material because Krulik was a con goer. So he's like going and collecting signatures, Isaac Asimov's signature, all kinds of these obviously hard to get signatures now, people have passed away, are a part of that. But we also have like audio cassette tapes of his original interviews with Zelazny that he used in writing his books. God knows what kind of material might be on those that wasn't used or that might be of interest to a Zelazny scholar now. We also have Bushwick High yearbook that has his picture. We didn't know he was a local teacher. I mean, so it's all these layers of meaning have come from that particular donation, and that'll be another thing that we'll be adding shortly. So some of the ways that we've been using the collection have been with class visits, like here's Lucas Kwong with one of his classes that have visited. Flash Sheridan, a local science fiction fan, big fan, has visited. These are curators from the George Lucas Museum that's opening in LA. They came out to do research specifically in our collection. They flew out here. I mean, it would be nice to have access to those kinds of resources, right? They wouldn't share them. But it was nice at least to open the doors to these folks and let them see what we have. Adam McLean was doing research before a presentation he gave a few years ago. Lisa Yasik and Doug Davis, they came out and seen the collection. But we also have a lot of challenges. One is labor. I mean, for my work on this, I don't really get credit for it. This is a labor of love. Also, like Wanett, she has other responsibilities. So I mean, it's not like we can both be there all the time to make these things available. So we do have to do a lot of coordination, a lot of going back and forth to figure out how to help people use these materials, which also relates to tenure and promotion. We want to make sure these things do benefit us in meaningful ways, unfortunately. I mean, it'd be great if we could just do it. But physical space is the other big problem. Where the archives is like the absolute worst possible place outside of a submerged in water basement. This is at the confluence of, if you've seen the buildings across the street, the main block of the City Tech buildings, is actually multiple buildings that have been stitched together over the years. Where the archives is the confluence of 3 of those buildings, like coming together. And so the HVAC system is a nightmare. It's either too hot or not on at all, no air movement. There's high humidity that we have had to deal with. And so that's something that we've been trying to work with the administration on. But there are unique challenges to being a CUNY school that makes that difficult. And also with COVID, we had a mold problem when there was no people moving around in the spaces. And that proliferated throughout the building. It wasn't just in the archives, it was everywhere. So we've done a lot of work to clean that up and make it available again. Which up until a few days ago, everything was going great in that regard. But we had a major water leak that soaked books on 2 of the stacks. But we did think ahead whenever Alan and I first started shelving the books, that we put scholarship in that one spot because we knew that there had been water damage in that area before we started putting the collection there. Still, it sucks.
Yeah.
But this is a resource, and you reach out to me and Wanett, and we will be happy to work with you in some way to make it available for people to use.
I would have been today if it was not literally still smelly and wet in there. So very, very, very bad timing that we can't invite you across the street today. So we're going to round out the end of this panel with our last presenter, Jen Keene, Hallucinated Cities, Designing Cognitive Environments Through Image and Imagination. Welcome, Jen.
It seems like everybody's presenting from this screen over here, so I'm sorry for the people that are stuck over in that corner. I'll speak up if you can't hear me. My presentation has a really long-winded title, but basically what I'm going to talk about is world building and how AI is going to influence how cities are designed in reality, and then how also we can use those cities as generators of stories and plot lines in science fiction. This is it's not going from, it's only going up.
It's a PDF, so it's going to go up and down instead of.
Is there no way that we can do it so that?
Yeah, if
go
you
like-
open it, I think I can do it.
Like a paper.
So about,
Yeah, we have to
about
open it.
myself, I have 3 careers. I've worked as and worked as an architect. I've been fortunate enough to work majority of my career in Sydney, London, and New York. I've worked on a variety of different building types. Probably the one you might be most familiar with is the Fulton Street Transit Centre. I was the lead design architect on that, worked on it for 5 years. I've also worked on a bunch of other buildings of similar types and characters in New York and across America.
Okay, try it now.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, come on.
You did mention in your email, right, that we could have technical issues. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
come on. Adobe's like, wants to have its moment.
I've also worked as an illustrator, and I still do that as well. I used to do it by hand, and now I do it on an iPad. And the illustrations went so well and got a certain amount of recognition that Apple ended up recruiting me and used me to do illustrations for their headquarters and then also for their website. And then finally, I write science fiction. I have 3 books published currently, and they top the Amazon Sci-Fi charts when they're released. And I've got a bunch of free novellas that I give away on my website. So these are the things I'm interested in: architecture, illustration, and science fiction. So the presentation is going to be in 3 sections. I'll keep it down to less than 20 minutes. History of science fiction cities, then how to create your own environments. Just like 3 steps, trying to keep it really simple, and then I'm going to show you how I use those 3 steps to design the environment for my current science fiction series. So this is reality, and it's what happens in science fiction. So society changes, and that impacts city design. Classic example is the Industrial Revolution, but also what we're seeing is happening in China in the last 20 years. When you get a huge flux of people going from the surrounding rural areas into a city, the city has to change to adapt to that. Typically what happens is people rush to build residential buildings and accommodation, and that's often at the expense of amenities and parks and things like that. So when you get a city that's growing rapidly and quickly, that inevitably affects how people interact with the city. And their character and their behavior then gets formed by the surrounding environment. So when characters behave in a certain way, that's what generates plot lines in science fiction. But also how characters behave in a city then affects legislation and how cities change. So you start to get this whole loop of society impacting city design, which then impacts literature and science fiction, which then impacts how people work, and then that goes back to affecting city design. So I'm going to do this quick recap of the last 100 years, and to show how this works in reality. So between the 20s and 40s, we were seeing a bit more of an industrialization about how cities are built, primarily to do with the better, easier access to steel and concrete. At the same time, particularly in Europe, we had a rise of fascism. And so that was reflected in science fiction in works such as Metropolis, Things to Come, and work by Franz Kafka. And they were very much to do with how bureaucracy and legislation creates a moral maze to trap people and stick people in. This was combined with sort of like Metropolis, which is about huge new cities growing up and dwarfing the people that live and work within them. Post-World War II, architects and city planners had a huge challenge, and that is, how do you replace the building stock that has been destroyed? Due to costs and certain ideological approaches to architecture, we ended up with an age of brutalism, which I actually think the buildings are very spectacular as sculptural objects. But it ended up, again, kind of dehumanizing the people that lived in it, which provided very, very fertile ground for science fiction. So Asimov wrote this great book, Caves of Steel, which is about people living inside domes and being afraid to go outside. J.G. Ballard wrote the book High Rise, which is about people living inside a high-rise building and how it kind of drives them crazy. Moving on now into the 70s, we had this massive expansion of cities, post-World War II. They were built very cheaply, not to very high building standards. And we started to get into areas of moral decay. This is an amazing building area. This is Kowloon Walled City in Hong Kong. And due to overlapping and misaligned legislation plans for Hong Kong, this area was lawless. So people were able to build and do whatever they wanted in that zone. And it actually ended up in something that's obviously a slum, but at the same time was a relatively safe place for people to live and work inside. Now, during the 70s, this inspired a lot of science fiction writers. Mobius worked on a really fantastic series of novels called NCAL, which had these multi-leveled and multi-layered cities. But probably more important to the history of science fiction was a young Canadian author called William Gibson visited. And it gave him an idea for 2 short stories, one called That Hologram of Orchids, the other one was called Burning Chrome. And those were his first 2 published stories, which got him the book contract, which he then wrote Neuromancer from. That is still fundamentally changing science fiction, even today. Neuromancer sparked off a whole new genre of science fiction called cyberpunk. And so when we get into the 80s, we were seeing cities now being filled with entertainment, external buildings, projection screens, Times Square, particularly in places like Tokyo and Japan. And so the artists at the time, Akira was an incredibly important piece of science fiction work based around what was going on in Japan at the time. And that directly influenced the film Blade Runner by Ridley Scott. And I think the aesthetics of Blade Runner are still affecting science fiction today. It's probably the most important work of science fiction in the way that it's changed the way that we perceive what a future city should look like. Now, in the late 90s and 2000s, we saw the next rise of science fiction approach to architecture and cities, and that is the prison megacity. Well, something which I'm very much into is a character called Judge Dredd, which is a British comic character. And there was a really great movie in 2012 by Alex Garland. You may know from other works like Ex Machina and Sunshine and things like that. And the idea of the megacity one in this comic is there's one continuous city that goes from Boston all the way down to DC. And the rest of America is a radiated wasteland after a nuclear war. So that city's walled in, everybody lives there, and there's no way out. And so to deal with that, there's a kind of very fascist police force that called judges, because they can dispense immediate justice. So they decide whether you live and die depending on whatever crime you do. Now, in the 2012 movie, they put the entire movie inside one city block. And that obviously it was a budgetary constraint, but a lot of the comics are actually based inside these buildings. And in that movie, it's 2 hours with 2 judges trying to bring down a gang of drug dealers. And the building itself is a fundamental character. And so how the society of the city has impacted the building design and then impacts upon how the characters work throughout the story. And finally, now we get to cities actually expanding and covering an entire planet. So these proto-works are actually from the 80s and 70s. So Dune, Arrakis, has become much more popular these days due to the amazing movies, and that's the entire planet being kind of mechanized and part of the story driver. And then we have Coruscant from Star Wars, which is what I think is where the Jedi come from, I'm not quite sure. But again, that whole planet is one large city. So over 100 years, we're very much influenced by what's going on in society. Architecture as a way of driving plot has gone from a mechanized city through to a mechanized planet. So how do we then, as science fiction fans and artists and designers, look at the next step of city design? So this is a city that I helped master plan. It's Songdo in South Korea. And it was based around a very, very utopian concept of making the most modern and best city in the world. So this whole thing was built over 10 years. It was done in quadrants, started off with a central park, and then built a business district around that, and then residential further out. Underneath it all are a series of control rooms which monitor and supervise everybody and everything that's going on. And the idea being is that first responders can get to accidents quicker if they can see what's happening everywhere. You don't need somebody to call up, they can just see a car crash or an accident. But it also regulates when the garbage gets taken out, how much power is needed, how much water is used. So it's a very noble idea to making the city a better place to live. But you could also really easily imagine how that could become a mass surveillance state. I know that weirdly architects have been dealing with these issues a lot of the time. And I don't think now it's beyond our concept to see these people very soon being replaced by smart systems. Yeah. And then once you put machines in charge of running cities, what does that mean for us, both in reality and as science fiction authors? So now, if we can see AI starting to supervise and run cities, and I see it working as an architect, AI is now designing cities for us, how do we create it as a character to drive stories forward? So I've got 3 rules to do this, really simple, just 3 approaches. And if you apply this to your story, it's going to give you a very, very strong world-building approach to characters. So the first one is, you need to decide what the city wants. So if the city is being run by AI, and we give that AI some agency, by its very nature is its intelligence, it will have an opinion, the city will want certain things, the AI will want certain things. So it could be to maintain order, to protect people. But the way you maintain order is by having control over people. That could be positive, or it could be negative, like Judge Dredd. Maybe the AI wants to generate data to grow itself. The best way to generate data would be to supervise people and watch what's going on, which could lead to a level of paranoia, for instance. Or maybe the city is being built upon the destruction of the past, and it wants to forget its past. So then you can get in ideas of the AI trying to delete or control information of what people are reading. Very 1984 approach. Or finally, maybe the city just has been told it has to do what it's told by its programmers, which means the AI running the city is basically a servant. Right? And maybe it doesn't want to be a servant, maybe it wants to be something else, which could lead to tensions that way. So pick an idea about what the AI wants and let that drive everything else. Second part. You need to pick a couple of choke points or areas where the city design is going to impact and drive your story. I said 3 to 5 max, you can do it with less than that. But to give you an example, if we take that idea of control, there are many ways that you can control population. Right? And these are just some of the ways that we can do it. So intimidate and expose. If you make people scared of being exposed, then they're going to naturally try and follow the law more carefully. But if you make the law so confusing, you don't know what's going on, like a Franz Kafka novel, then at any point, any time, you could be arrested and exposed as a criminal. It could happen to anybody who set it up that way. Then criminals, once you're exposed, you could be punished. So very simply, control can come down to a way that you maintain law and order. Another way you can control people is you can make it so that it's really hard for them to get around, or they're very confused to get around. Make it so that daily lives are easy in a fixed place, but if they want to go travel or go further than that, the city is preventing them from doing it. That is a way of control. So this is an example now of looking at that control. Let's take the idea of a journey. And again, looking at this from a point of view about how we world build to create plot lines. So let's say you have to leave your apartment and go to a park to meet somebody. A confusing interchange, and a very generic title, but imagine you're trying to get somewhere and you can't work out where to go. Now we all have phones, and phones can help us guide it, but maybe the information coming into that phone from the AI is deliberately wrong. So you get lost, and you end up in a narrow passageway. I'm sure we've all done that when we're traveling to a city we don't know, you suddenly end up in some place that's much smaller. You go down that narrow passageway, and you come to a crowd choke point. Now choke points are lethal. When we're designing cities, we absolutely work opposite that. But if an AI wants to control you, you want to make it so you don't want to leave your house, and we've seen civil riots and protests in places like Hong Kong, right? Left your house, you get lost, you get stuck in a narrow passageway, suddenly you end up in a crowd that's crushing you, okay? Desperate to get out, you get out any way you can, and suddenly you end up blind corner. you don't know what's around there if you see a shadow of somebody on the wall. All of that comes from this idea of control. And that's just from leaving a house to try and get someplace as a narrative arc that could either be a short story in itself or a fundamental character development point. All of these manipulate behavior more effectively than most dialogue. Right? The classic case of show, don't tell. Show somebody moving through the city and let that experience show the kind of authoritarian state they're in if they're looking at control. Final part, embed ethics into form. Ask these questions. Who gets light? Who gets privacy? Who gets the ground plane? Who gets the view? You can add this up into any way you want. But these questions can then drive the architecture, which then drives how the people experience it. Who gets light? Just that social hierarchy within a building could be a driver in itself. Give these examples. If your city fears its citizens, if the AI is scared of you, it will build choke points or ways to control you. If the city AI worships the elites, the people that program it, it will lift them above the crowd. It will try and separate them. If the AI values order, it will relocate the discontented. Each one of these could be the premise for a story. Again, coming out the idea of AI and control. How I use that, these are the current book series that I'm working on. In 2016, the White House released a really, really prescient and kind of terrifying paper, Artificial Intelligence, Automation and the Economy. And it was saying by 2026, we're going to start to see the impacts of AI. So it's actually pretty close. We're already seeing that. And that AI will lead to automation, which is going to lead to mass unemployment. So I took that idea, and automation-led unemployment leads to massive amounts of unemployed that will break the social support system, which would then lead to a loss of law and order, which would lead to the separation of the 1%, or the 0.1%. So that paper gave me the idea of what the city wants, and then gave me those kind of choke points, those 3 to 5 points that drive the narrative. Terrible sketch that I did, so we don't need to be artists to do this. I was like, if you want to rise above population, make your buildings taller. Now, because I'm an architect, I could do this sort of stuff, but nobody needs to draw this. I designed a mile-high tower. So this is the Empire State down here. And the bottom half mile is just a truss holding it up. And above that, we have where 0.1% live. And they actually own like 50 floors, not a couple of floors. Give them as a grid across the city, make it really dystopian. Because if you don't give a shit what's happening lower down, you can do whatever you want above that. And then this was an illustration I did for Cyberpunk Day 2022 to show that idea of you have this disconnected world happening above, like kind of the chaos and the unemployed people living below. Now, I'm fortunate enough that I can draw this way, I've been doing it most of my career. But now we have software, which is amazing, and it's a tool that everybody should be using, which is generative AI. It's incredibly creative. People say it's not creative, I don't think. Use it that much. But the idea of confusing interchange, choke points, all that sort of stuff, now all you need to do is get 10 or 15 words from that idea, and you put it into a chat window, and it'll give you like 4 or 5 images out of it. So that is a way which you can very quickly produce images, which will then give you story ideas. This is an example of one I did a few weeks ago. I'm writing a short story where Central Park is being sold because the city needs money to pay for all the unemployed. And the new owners build a wall around it. And so I just went into Midjourney. So this is Midjourney. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. And I did a short prompt of like cyberpunk, dystopian city of the future, concrete wall around Central Park. So this is kind of what I had in my head, what it would look like. But then you started to do images at ground level. And I hadn't even had time to really think about that yet. But what it was suggesting is this wall would then have like entrance points with security guards. It would have gun turrets on top and radar and things like that. So just by having that idea, doing a couple of prompts, it gave me these images that then are generating the plot line going forward. So instead of having the ability to have to draw this stuff out, if you just do those 3 bullet points, what you want the city to be, put it into generative AI, it's going to give you images that then can help you decide upon where the characters are going to go and what they're going to do. And also then, it can also take off some of the burden of having to design all this stuff in your mind. You can get images like this and use this to help provide the narrative, the texture, and the detail you want from the science fiction. So that's it. 3 simple rules. Decide what the city wants, choose the pressure points or how the city implements what it wants, and then embed ethics into the forms of the buildings. Do those 3 things, and you've got a really consistent world-building environment that will drive plot points. Finally, just enjoy yourself when you're doing it. Right? When I write sci-fi, I'm doing this stuff, I take it so seriously, and then 6 months after it's finished, I wonder what all the fuss is about, right? It's just, just a book or just an image. So enjoy yourselves, but take these 3 rules, bring it into generative AI, let it suggest ideas and city designs and building designs for you, and then see what new ideas that can spark from you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody, we have about 10 minutes. I mean, the pizza's here, so, that's going to distract you all from, don't let it distract you from asking questions of Jim in particular. Yeah. Because Richard needed to go, which is why we did his Q&A earlier. Go for it, Lee.
I'm a big cockpit fan, and I was just thinking, it's so interesting that you were talking about your use of AI, which of course we talk to our students about a lot, and there's a lot of debate in our last symposium, of course, about AI and science fiction. Do you have the experience at all that using these images might take you away from something else that might be embedded in yourself somewhere, or do you feel that it only expands your creative vision? I'm just curious because I know.
I would say probably both. I'm using it more and more and more as an idea generator. I still have that original idea where I get like the 5 or 6 points, but it just saves me the time, especially when you're working full time as another job and you've got families and stuff like that. That putting it into these systems and letting it do a lot of the grunt work of visualizing something just enables me to get to the writing quicker. Absolutely, it may mean that I miss certain ideas, or if I spent a month noodling around and making up a different idea. But that month I may not come up with an idea anyway. So I think yes.
It's like a writing block.
Yeah. Like it's just it just generates a different idea than one I would come up with by myself, but not better or worse. And I believe like the more ideas you have, the better. The more ways you can visualize stuff, the better.
Yes.
Hi, first of all, fantastic presentation. The images were incredible. So in science fiction, a lot of times you get predictions of future scientific innovation. So I'm wondering, what was your biggest, vibe that you got from imaginary architecture that maybe influenced some things that you could see happening in real life? I mean, I know you talked about Blade Runner, as like a great thing, but like, do you see any, whether it's dystopian or not, but any sort of things that happen often in this imaginative architecture that could possibly help us in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 answers to that. I mean, the Songdo city is an example. I think we're going to inevitably see a greater level of supervision, and that being run by smart systems or machine learned systems, and they come with their own biases. So we're already seeing, police increasingly relying upon, facial recognition that's automated from systems they bought from Amazon, for instance. So that is going to happen, and I think cities are more and more going to become automated in that way. And like anything, it's good and bad, right? Potentially, if it stops, if you're able to predict a fire or a car crash earlier or get somebody that, get the police there quicker, that could really help. But it could also be a real tool for supervision. And the idea of like the Mile High Tower, you think about it, in 2016, 2017, there are a ton of very tall buildings being built in Manhattan, particularly the southern end of Central Park. And I was involved in detailed work on one of those. And there are pieces of architecture that are amazing because the budget's great, but nobody in this room is ever going to be able.
Yeah.
It's unlikely anybody in this room will ever be able to afford to live in them, to put it that way. And so we're already seeing the buildings becoming enclaves for the rich, but set within the city because they want to live in the city because it's great. They just don't want to mix with people who live in the city. So I think that's already coming to pass that way. Just want to make it taller if the money was there.
Great presentation. It was inspirational. For writing. Wanted to know, like, you said you're AI, you mentioned Midjourney, are there other ones that you use, or that's primarily that you use to generate your images?
So, as a technology, I've never experienced something that is evolving as quickly as it is. So, Midjourney is one that I use a lot, but its current model is about 6 months old, which means it's quite dated these days. The current best in breed is the Google one called Nano Banana, and that's producing work that's truly photorealistic. But in 2 months' time, Midjourney has its next model coming out, and that one will be the best one. So it's really easy just to hop around from software to software. So I would just suggest pick one, and Midjourney is really easy to use. The interface on it is so simple, and I think that's for 95% of what we're doing, that's good enough. But it's very easy to get emails, automated emails that just update you on the latest models. There's a lot of this on YouTube where they compare the systems, so I just watch a lot of YouTube videos comparing them. And I'm trying Nano Banana as a switch. The image quality is better, but it's less easy to use. And I like it when systems start to hallucinate, and it's a bit more on point, whereas Midjourney can really go off in crazy directions. So you have to find the one I think that works best for your workflow.
And just to add to that, in some of the work that I do, I only use local generative AI technologies. With things like Midjourney and Nano Banana from Google and others like that, you're basically, they do have free accounts that folks can use, but you can also pay for those, but you're using someone else's hardware and their models and don't have as much control over the outputs that you might have if you do it on your own using local models. So like, this is my workstation at home that I hobbled together with 72 gigs of VRAM so that I can run some larger models for like text generation, but also do some image generation on the 3090 Founders Edition at the top. It has 24 gigs of VRAM, which right now is really great with one of the open, it's not an open source in the sense like you can see the underlying code, but there are open quant models, meaning that they are models that have been trained for image generation, text generation, sound generation, etc., that you're allowed to use under different licenses. Some of the best ones right now are coming out of China because they're wanting to, in a sense, I think, flood the market with these technologies to undercut the paid stuff that comes from OpenAI, Midjourney, Google, etc. But one of those that right now is really fantastic is Z-Image. That's what I've started experimenting with, though the problem with some of these newer models is you have to use more advanced software to operate it, which isn't as turnkey as like Midjourney. So like you just want to sit down and start generating ideas to write a story like Jim's talking about, Midjourney is a great way to go, or Google's a great way to go. But if you want more control over your workflow, then you can use some of these other models on your own hardware. And of course that keeps everything closed, nobody sees what you're working on if you like to keep your cards close to your chest. And you can follow a lot of this on the subreddit for Stable Diffusion, which is like where a lot of the open source image generation has started. I didn't want to click on it because I don't know if there could be anything inappropriate for the symposium.
We'll take, we have two last questions. Mary?
I was just wondering if you've done any literary research into urban studies at all, or if you've read any of like situationist literature, or even Wordsworth's Prelude, which are like engagements with the urban environment that are sort of imaginary based as well as on the street. And so the sort of meandering and the wandering that can occur through the experience of moving through a city. I was just wondering if you...
I'm lucky enough that in my education and my kind of day job that I've worked on a lot of city design that just comes naturally as part of the process. Or when you start to work on increasingly bigger buildings, the way that they interact with the city is really important. And so I quite want to take all the guidelines are given and do the inverse of that, and that gives you like a dystopia. But I haven't read those. Maybe I'll get a few texts from you after this to look at. It was good to read it.
Jonathan Crary, I think, has written about it as well. It's just a bit more about experience.
Okay.
And
I'll write it down.
last question from Professor, and then we'll break for lunch.
Jim, thanks for that presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It's very, very visionary. I wanted to ask you, you were using AI to design these dystopian cities, one with central park, all around. In your estimation, how often is AI being used to plan the development of New York? And to follow up on that, what's the plot line in New York?
Only 6% of architects are currently using AI, which is crazy. But every architectural company I know in Manhattan uses it all the time. It's fundamentally changed the way I work in the last 18 months. And it's almost like a different career now. And I use it all the time to design buildings. And I know other companies do. So stuff that's getting built, stuff that's getting designed now is all 90% designed by AI. Because so much of building is just regulations based and rules based, heights and setbacks and widths of corridor and stuff like that. And I had to learn all that by hand, whereas now all that stuff is automated. And increasingly with image generation models, that's going to change the design of the outside of buildings. So I would say stuff that's getting built in 3 to 5 years' time will be entirely AI designed. As for the future of the city, it's very easy to be pessimistic. I think so much of science fiction is pessimistic. I think AI is going to have a huge impact on the job market, but it's going to change it. I don't think it's going to eliminate it. I think we're seeing right now there's a lack of hiring in lots of professions because older companies are using AI to reduce people, to let go of staff. But I think any company that sees AI as a way to save money is missing the opportunity to change the way they work and do better work. And so I think the companies that are younger and can see AI as a tool to improve what they're doing will outcompete the companies that just reduce their workforce. So I think it's going to be rough for a few years, but then I do think it's going to switch over. And I can see it actually being a real economy boom once this stuff's more integrated. But we're in that difficult transition from technology that's been around 100 years, that's end of life, switching to this new economy. So in terms of what it means for the city in the future, I don't know. But I think, and that's going to come down to how many unemployed there are and what the drain is on city finances. But I think we're going to see more really, really expensive buildings for the few people that can afford it.
Let's see what comes down.
I think New Yorkers are experts on how horrible that
Yeah,
that
that's
concept.
really no different from like Rockefeller doing stuff as well.
On that note, we can break for lunch. We're going to reconvene after lunch at 1:10-ish for student panel. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again.